everybody. Welcome to this question and answer session about eco-printing. So I'm just delighted to be able to share some of my top tips with you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicola Brown and I live in rural Ireland in a very small place called Clashin. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. So if you're watching this live or on the replay, please feel free to leave me a comment. So the very first question I would like to answer is, what exactly is eco-printing? In simple terms, eco-printing is gathering vegetation or using onion skins. I like to grow my own vegetation. It's wrapping fabric or paper with this vegetation, then either boiling or steaming in a pot for several hours to extract color and prints directly from the natural material. Done correctly, these prints will all be actually color fast and washable. So it's important to understand that there are as many different ways of eco-printing as there are of doing any interesting technique in the art and craft world. So what I'm sharing today is what I enjoy doing, what I find works very well for me. It fits into my ethos of being as sustainable as possible, and it also works well for my workshop students. So I'm thrilled now just to welcome Sheila from Midwest US, Gabby, who's in Enniscorthy, which is just down the road from me. Hi, Gabby. I actually was born in a nursing home in Enniscorthy town myself. And Phyllis, hi, from Indianapolis in Indiana in America as well. So thank you all very much for joining. So as I've said, eco-printing is using natural vegetation to create a direct contact print on fabric or paper. And because you're using hot temperatures to achieve this result, it's important to be very mindful about health and safety when you're eco-printing. So I'm going to chat a little bit about powdered mordants in 1 minute. Traditionally, they are used to fix color on fabric. But aside from the health implications of using them, it's very important to wear sensible clothing when you're eco-printing. You're going to be dealing with rusty metal potentially, you're dealing with hot water, you're dealing with bundles coming out of the pot, and they may get leaves and vegetation stuck in a pipe if you choose to use a tube or a pipe to roll your bundles on. So make sure that you don't get a steam burn. Think of wearing sensible clothes, no open-toed sandals. Process your bundles either outside in a wind-free area or a very well-ventilated kitchen, so you're not inhaling the fumes from the pot as it's processing. I have actually had 2 people allergic to the vinegar that I like to use at times to help modify my colors. So again, that's something you might choose to wear a mask when you're eco-printing, and you might also choose to wear some sort of very fine gloves if you find that your skin is, if you have issues with your skin and it gets irritated. Personally, I'm lucky, I can handle almost anything. So I try to work without gloves. But if skin issues are something that you do have, I recommend that you wear very fine gloves, such as surgical gloves, and then you can still have the sensitivity in your fingertips, but it will protect you from any of the pot liquid or potentially if you were allergic to the leaves. So what are powdered mordants? A mordant is a metal salt that has been traditionally used in natural dyeing for many, many, many generations. It's used to, you make a solution of the mordant, and what happens with traditional dyeing is that you would make this solution using something like alum sulfate, ferrous sulfate, or copper sulfate. Prepare your fabric in this, And that makes a fabric receptive to receiving natural dyes. And once the fabric receives those dyes, it actually will then be color and light fast if you have done the mordanting process correctly. In my practice, I like to decide that you would like to eco-print or natural dye using mordants, please just make sure to wear a mask so you don't inhale the powder. However, I like to use my pot as a mordant, and that means that the metal of the pot helps, when there's a liquid solution in it, to create a mild mordanting effect. My big pot you just saw was cast iron, but the most useful pot, and the one I recommend for new eco-printers, is aluminium. It's the easiest to get. This is a 40-litre pot, and the bigger the pot you have, actually, the better, because you don't want to cram your bundles in. It gives better results when the bundles are free to actually move around within the pot. I see that Norton, hey Norton, all the way in Australia, is saying that pot. Yes, that's an absolute beauty. That large pot of mine is 240 litres. I brought it back from France in my pickup truck, and it's wood-fired. It takes approximately 17 minutes to reach a boil. And in fact, if it didn't get so hot, I would be tempted to use it as a spa or hot tub as well. Anyway, reactive pots are the best. I absolutely love them. And the pots that are most useful, aluminium, for me, followed by cast iron, and then copper is also very useful. Now, if you're already getting a few tips from this and you'd like more advice, tips and tutorials about eco-printing, wet felting, or growing your own dye plants, why not subscribe to this channel, my YouTube channel, and hit the bell for getting the notifications when I upload new videos. Moving on, if you're new to eco-printing and you would like to work without powdered mordants, often you may hear this called working in a dirty pot. So not only am I utilizing the metal of the pot to help influence the color, but I also will put other metal into the pot as well. But it's very important to understand some fabric responds better than others to using this method. And also, all the vegetation that you might think of traditionally that you can use for natural dyeing, without pre-mordanting your fabric, you will not achieve color that will last through repeated washes in the washing machine and will stand the test of time. So there are two things here. We have the fabric, which you're going to print, and then in a minute or two, I will tell you some of the vegetation I recommend. But as somebody new to eco-printing totally, or somebody who would like to try eco-printing without mordants, the two fabrics that print the best are wool and silk, or any protein-based fabric, in fact. So a protein-based fabric comes from an animal. Here, for example, this is a lamb's wool cushion. This fabric was woven locally, and these are printed, or the prints here are blackberry leaves. So they are very, very good for a printing on wool or silk. And then another of my favorite pieces of vegetation or sort of vegetation is eucalyptus. I do grow my own in Ireland, but this skirt here on the left, that's eco-printed using onion skins. So everybody, regardless of where they live in the world, usually has access to onion skins. It's not just gold colors, this is sycamore, and it is possible to print on cellulose fabric as well, as those last two images showed. Now, cellulose fabrics come from a plant, so the wool, silk, etc., they all come from an animal, but cellulose things, linen, cotton, ramie, which is actually made from nettles, and included for the purpose of eco-printing are man-made fabrics like bamboo and viscose, tencel as well. While they are man-made, they are actually plant-based. So those fabrics are all absolutely possible to print on without powdered mordants. And I like to make a homemade rust water solution to work with those. So I'm going to post a link to a video that I have on YouTube in the description of this video below. And that just gives a little bit more information about working with rust water and cellulose fabric. But for today, I'm concentrating really on wool, silk, mohair, cashmere, yak. And the vegetation that works absolutely the best and is easiest to access to get excellent results at the beginning. My top pick would be onion skins. It's so simple to get good prints from. And here is an example of a large silk scarf, one of my own, printed with onion skins. And you want to use the dry, papery part on the outside of the onion. Trust me, as the skin gets nearer the fleshy part that you eat, if you use the onion skin that's too moist, your clothing or whatever you are printing is actually going to smell of onions in the future. So just don't do that. So onion skins are fantastic. Rose leaves are fantastic. Blackberry leaves are fantastic. I find that those three types of vegetation never fail to give good prints, regardless of where in the world you live. Also, black tea leaves, a sprinkle of black tea leaves is very, very effective. And if you live in warmer climates and you have access to achiote seeds, for example, in Mexican cuisine, they would be used a lot, annatto seeds, they are lovely to sprinkle on your fabric, and you get beautiful punctuations of red color, sometimes with a little orange halo at the outside. Another thing you can use from your larder is turmeric. Slice the fresh root and you can put that down. And that does seem to give very good prints that stand the color test with time. Now, turmeric powder as a natural dye is considered to be fugitive. It does fade, but I haven't found that the achiote seeds or the turmeric root actually, doesn't fade with time. So once you've gathered your vegetation, the next thing that you would do is you would tie your bundle up. You would lay your vegetation out and you would tie it up after you have prepared the fabric, obviously. And that's the sort of thing that I teach, the way I like to prepare my fabric during my online or in-person workshops. But this here that I'm sharing with you is one of my favorite tying materials. This is T-shirt yarn. It's waste yarn from making T-shirts. Now, I'll share some links to resources in the description of the video below, because I find that this was very difficult for me to source at the beginning. It's not inexpensive here in Europe. It costs approximately 15 euros a roll, unless you get it at the like of an inexpensive shop somewhere like Portugal, because this is used for knitting and crocheting. So anywhere you can access this, where people do a lot of knitting and crocheting, you may well get it a little bit cheaper. So I'm going to post a link in the video description below. So something with a bit of give and stretch, preferably a natural material, that's what I use to tie my bundles. Now, what do I roll my bundles up on? If I'm working with felt, I don't necessarily use something to roll them on. However, pipes are fantastic for adding modification of color when we're working without traditional powdered mordants. And they also provide a rigid core when you are rolling fabric that's light and soft. So this particular silk scarf was rolled on a copper pipe. And one of my absolute favorite tools from my studio is this little pipe cutter here. So this one goes, you open it You insert your pipe through here, and then you start to tighten this, and then you rotate it around the pipe. So this is wonderful for narrower diameter pipes. I cannot urge you enough to get one of these if you do a lot of eco printing and you're likely to be cutting pipes. Of course, you can also use a wooden dowel. You can use a twig to roll your bundles on, or you can use wider diameter pipes with rusty metal. I particularly love them because they give good modification of color, and the wider the diameter of pipe, the longer the length of your tie marks will be on your bundle. But you can't cut them with the small pipe cutter. So my neighboring farmer cuts them for me with an angle grinder. I have two of my favorite books to share with you. Now, these books come with a little reservation. These are not eco printing books per se. They are the books that I find the most helpful in my studio when I need to refer to something or reference back to something. And while with the eco printing that I am doing without the mordants, when I'm working in the dirty pot, I don't use the mordant. I still find that this simple book called Wild Colour by Jenny Dean is one of my favorite books. It's a very simple book about natural dyeing, and it gives all the information you need to know about traditional dyeing, plus fantastic sections showing you the sorts of color you can expect to achieve from different vegetation. Now, why would this be a favorite book when I'm not using the mordants? I think it's important to understand how the mordants help with the color. And by reading Jenny's book, I can then identify which metal pot might be a good pot to use with specific vegetation. And also I do natural dyeing myself using homegrown vegetation. And for that, I always mordant my fabric correctly. So if I'm doing natural dyeing, I do mordant. Wild Colour is my Bible. And if I'm eco printing without mordants, without traditional powdered mordants, Eco Colour by India Flint is my Bible. Now, some people may say that this is not a how-to eco printing book. It's not. That book that India Flint wrote is a wonderful book. It was never intended to be a how-to book. And for me, it's a resource to go back to and dip into time and time again. India's philosophy is very, very interesting. It ties in well with my ethos here. I try and use what's around me and be as sustainable as possible. And the thing is, you can learn eco printing by attending workshops, by reading books, by joining in groups on Facebook, and that's all for another workshop there, or for another video. I'll share some of my favorite online resources in a future video, but I cannot recommend Eco Colour enough. If you would like a book that you can dip into time and time again, and each time I read it or look through it, I actually learn something different. Now, I see that Norton is saying that Wild Colour is so easy to read and a book that he goes to regularly. I really like that because it was my buddy Meredith Smith in California who introduced me to the book. And while I hadn't intended natural dyeing at the time, I was blown away and I keep going back to it myself. And do any of you have any books that you would recommend yourselves for eco printing or natural dyeing? Because it's always great to learn what other people recommend. So if you do, please drop them in the comments below. So as I said, paper is also possible to eco print. And I like to do this in the dirty pot also. But if you have any questions about eco printing for me, now is the time to ask them, because otherwise I'm going to be saying goodbye and I'm going to be seeing you in a future video, hopefully. So I'm just going to do a brief recap. I like to work using my pot as mordant. My favorite 2 pots are either they're cast iron or they're aluminium. Copper would be my 3rd favorite. My top tip in relation to wool to use or fabric when you start eco printing, wool and silk. And of course, if you are a felt maker and you work with wool and silk regularly, felt is absolutely wonderful to eco print. So I'm a wet felt maker and it's my favorite fabric to print on. For tying material, I recommend something stretchy. Oh, and I forgot to say that in relation to heating my pots, how I heat the pots, my favorite source of material, either gas, because you really need to have that pot boiling, and gas is my favorite heat source. I'll share the sort of gas boiler that I use in the video description below as well. And also I love using a wood burning stove. So that big pot outside is wood burning. So I'm seeing here, oh, here we have, Lisa has a question. Lisa, thanks very much for tuning in. So the kind of paper that I recommend, this particular paper here was a watercolor paper, not over expensive, but it took the colors well, not just in these darker ranges, it also took some other colors excellently as well, but I don't have them here to show you. I'll show you in another video. And my favorite paper is actually what's called wallpaper lining paper. So if you live in an old house, as I do, you may choose to wallpaper, which I don't. Mine is all lime wash behind me. But if you are using wallpaper on bad walls, you can get this creamy color plain paper that goes under your wallpaper, and that evens out the surface of your walls. That's called wallpaper lining paper. And I find that that prints absolutely beautifully, and it comes in rolls, the same sort of length as wallpaper itself, the same width and length, and it comes in different weights. So my favorite weight would be the heaviest weight. It would be 1400 grams. And I will see if I can find a link to that and also post it. I'm going to just write myself a note here, and I will post that in the video comments below. Thanks for that question, Lisa. And Gabby, I see Gabby, she's saying she'll see me on the 23rd in Raheen, one of my only face-to-face classes of the year, just down the road from me. So that's lovely, Gabby. I'll see you there. So just to recap, we've got the pot, the gas, the stretchy material, the metal pipes, my favorite books. Any other questions for me? No. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this live stream. If you do have any questions and you're watching on the replay, please just leave them in the comments below. Consider subscribing to my channel for frequent tips, advice, and tutorials. And until next time, goodbye from Clasheen. Thank you for watching.